There is a war happening inside you right now. Not a war with weapons or armies. Not a war you can see on a map or read about in headlines. It is a silent war. A war fought in the hidden corridors of your mind, in the quiet hours before dawn when the rest of the world is still asleep and you are wide awake, staring at the ceiling, your chest tight, your thoughts racing, your heart pounding against your ribs like a prisoner desperate to escape. You know this war. You have fought it before. Maybe you are fighting it right now, even as you listen to these words. The war against anxiety. The war against the relentless flood of worry that fills your mind before the day has even begun. The war against the what-ifs, the worst-case scenarios, the endless replay of conversations that went wrong, the anticipation of disasters that have not yet arrived and may never arrive at all. You wake up and before your eyes are fully open, before you have taken your first conscious breath of the morning, the anxiety is already there, waiting, patient. It has never left. It sits at the edge of your awareness like a dark cloud gathering on the horizon, and as the day begins, as the demands pile up, as the messages arrive and the responsibilities multiply, and the uncertainties of life press in from every direction, that cloud grows darker and heavier until it feels like the whole sky has become a storm. And here is what makes anxiety so devastating. It is not just the feeling itself. It is what that feeling does to everything else. It steals your concentration. It poisons your relationships. It takes perfectly ordinary moments, a cup of coffee in the morning, a conversation with someone you love, the simple pleasure of sitting quietly in a room, and transforms them into opportunities for worry. It makes you live not in the present moment, where life actually happens, but in an imagined future full of threats that exist only in your mind. You have tried to fight it. Of course you have. You have told yourself to calm down, to think positive, to just stop worrying. You have tried breathing exercises and distraction and keeping yourself busy. You have read articles and followed advice and promised yourself that tomorrow you would handle things better. And yet the anxiety returns. It always returns. Because you have been treating the symptoms without ever touching the root. What if I told you that over 2,000 years ago, a group of philosophers discovered something so powerful, so precise, so psychologically penetrating that modern therapists still use their ideas today? What if I told you that these ancient thinkers did not just talk about how to feel better, they built an entire system, a daily practice, a philosophy of life that was specifically designed to free human beings from the tyranny of fear, from the crippling weight of worry, from the mental suffering caused by anxiety? What if the answer to the war inside you has been waiting, quietly, in the ancient words of the Stoics? This is not a motivational speech. This is not a collection of pretty quotes designed to make you feel inspired for 10 minutes before the anxiety rushes back in. What you are about to hear is a practical, step-by-step guide, 7 specific ancient Stoic practices that you can begin implementing every single morning, starting tomorrow, to fundamentally transform your relationship with anxiety and reclaim the peace of mind that is your birthright as a rational human being. Stay with me. Every word of what follows has the potential to change your life. Welcome to Stoic Wisdom. If you are here, if you found this video and pressed play and gave us your time and attention on this particular morning, I want you to know something. I want you to know that it was not an accident. There are no accidents when it comes to the things we need most. You are here because some part of you, some deep and knowing part that exists beneath all the noise and worry, recognizes that there is a better way to live, a wiser way, a stronger way. And you are ready to find it. My name is not important. What is important is what we are about to explore together, because what you are going to hear over the next several minutes is not just philosophy, it is not just history. It is a living, breathing tradition of wisdom that has helped soldiers and slaves, emperors and exiles, kings and common people face the hardest moments of their lives with dignity, with clarity, and with a profound inner calm that the storms of the world could not shake. This is Stoicism. And before we go any further, I want to make you a promise. By the time this video is over, you will not just understand Stoicism as an intellectual concept. You will have 7 specific, concrete, actionable practices that you can carry into your morning routine, into your daily life, and into every moment when anxiety rises up and tries to take control. These are not theoretical ideas. They are tools, real tools, forged in the fires of real human suffering, refined over centuries of use, and proven not just by ancient testimony but by modern psychology to work. Now, before we begin, if this video speaks to you, if what you hear resonates in a way that feels true and important, I want to ask you to do something. Hit that like button. It costs you nothing, and it tells us that this work matters to you. Subscribe to Stoic Wisdom if you have not already, and make sure you ring that notification bell so that every new piece of wisdom we share finds its way directly to you. Share this video with someone who is struggling, someone who is overwhelmed, someone who is losing a battle with worry and anxiety and does not know where to turn. Your share could be the thing that changes their life. And if you want to go even further, if you want to show your deep support for this channel and the work we do to bring ancient wisdom into the modern world, please consider supporting us with super thanks. That support means everything to us, and it allows us to keep creating content that goes deep, that takes its time, that refuses to give you shallow answers to profound questions. Now, let us begin. The story of a man who understood anxiety better than anyone. Before we dive into the 7 steps, I want to tell you a story. Because Stoicism is not abstract philosophy. It was born from real life. It was born from suffering, from loss, from the kind of circumstances that would break most people, and understanding where it came from will help you understand why it works. His name was Epictetus, and when he was a child, he was a slave. Not a metaphorical slave, not someone who felt trapped in a job they hated or a relationship that was going nowhere. An actual slave, owned by a man named Epictetus, who worked as a secretary to the Roman Emperor Nero, one of history's most notorious tyrants. Epictetus had no rights. He had no freedom. He had no control over where he lived, what he ate, what work he did, or what happened to his body. The ancient sources tell us that his master once twisted his leg, perhaps to test his reaction, perhaps simply because he could. Epictetus is said to have responded calmly, warning his master that the bone would break. When it did break, Epictetus reportedly said, "Did I not tell you it would break?" without a trace of panic or rage. Whether that story is entirely literal or somewhat embellished by time does not matter. What matters is what it reveals about the man and the philosophy he would later develop and teach. Because Epictetus understood something that most people living in freedom never grasp. He understood that the circumstances of your outer life, your social position, your physical condition, the behavior of the people around you, the events that happen to and around you, none of that is truly you. None of that is where your real life takes place. Your real life, Epictetus taught, happens inside, in your mind, in your judgments, your interpretations, your choices, your responses. And that inner life, that is the one thing that no master, no emperor, no tyrant, no circumstance can ever take from you. That is the one thing that is always, unconditionally, yours. This insight, this radical, world-shaking insight, is the foundation of everything you are about to learn. It is the soil from which all 7 of our steps grow. And once you truly understand it, not just intellectually, but in your bones, in your nervous system, in the way you move through the world, anxiety will never have quite the same power over you again. Because here is what anxiety really is. When you strip away all the complexity and look at its bare structure, anxiety is fear about things outside your control. It is the mind reaching forward into an imagined future, grabbing hold of possibilities and catastrophes and threats that have not yet occurred, and then treating those imagined events as though they are already real, already happening, already threatening the things you love. Anxiety says, what if I lose my job? What if this relationship ends? What if I get sick? What if everything falls apart? And then, without waiting for any of those things to actually happen, it delivers the emotional experience of the disaster as though it were occurring right now. You feel the fear, you feel the grief, you feel the helplessness, you feel the pain, not because any of it is real, but because your mind has convinced itself that it is. The Stoics saw this with perfect clarity. They understood anxiety long before the word existed in its modern psychological form, and they built a complete system for addressing it, not by teaching people to suppress their feelings or pretend everything was fine, but by teaching people to see reality more accurately, to think more precisely, and to direct their attention and energy toward the things that actually matter and are actually within their power to affect. That system is what we are about to explore, step by step. Step 1. The dichotomy of control, drawing the line that changes everything. We begin where Epictetus himself always began, with what he considered the single most important idea in all of philosophy. An idea so foundational, so essential, so radical in its implications that he opens his handbook for living, a book called the Enchiridion, which means something you can hold in your hand, with it as the very first line. He writes, "Some things are within our power, while others are not. Within our power are opinion, motivation, desire, aversion, and, in a word, whatever is of our own doing. Not within our power are our body, our reputation, our office, and, in a word, whatever is not of our own doing." Read those words again. Let them sink in, because hidden in those two simple sentences is the master key to freedom from anxiety. The Stoics called this idea the dichotomy of control. And understanding it fully, applying it consistently, living it daily is the first and most important step in your morning practice. Let me make it concrete for you, because this is too important to leave abstract. Every single thing in your life, every situation, every relationship, every circumstance, every event, every possibility that you can think of right now, it belongs to one of two categories. Either it is something within your power, or it is not. Either you have genuine, meaningful control over it, or you do not. There is no third category. There is no sort of, or kind of, or mostly. The line is clear, it is sharp, and once you learn to see it, everything changes. What is within your power? Your thoughts, your judgments, your values, your intentions, your efforts, your responses, the way you interpret events, the meaning you choose to give things, the effort you decide to put in, the words you choose to say, the principles you decide to live by. These things, and only these things, are genuinely, fully, unconditionally within your power. What is not within your power? Almost everything else. The weather, the economy, other people's opinions of you, whether your business succeeds, whether your health holds, whether the people you love choose to stay or go, the outcome of your efforts, as distinct from the efforts themselves, the past, the future, in its specifics, the behavior of every other human being on this planet. Now, here's the question that cuts to the heart of everything. Where does anxiety live? Anxiety lives exclusively in the second category. Every anxious thought you have ever had, every worried night, every racing heart, every knot in your stomach, every single instance of anxiety in your entire life has been about something in the second category. Something outside your control, something that might happen or might not, something that depends on other people, on circumstances, on forces beyond your reach. And here is what the Stoics understood with a kind of brilliant, almost ruthless clarity. Pouring your mental and emotional energy into things outside your control is not just ineffective, it is a form of madness. It is like standing in the rain and being furious at the clouds. It is like trying to hold back the tide with your bare hands. It is effort wasted, energy squandered, precious life poured into a vessel that can never be filled. The Stoics did not say this to be harsh. They said it because they understood something about human well-being that most people spend their entire lives never grasping. Your sense of peace, your happiness, your equanimity, these cannot come from the world going the way you want it to go, because the world never fully cooperates. The world is always doing its own thing. The weather changes, people disappoint, plans fall apart, the economy rises and falls, bodies get sick. Life is uncertain, and it will remain uncertain no matter how much you worry about it. But there is a place where peace is always possible, a place that is never at the mercy of the storms outside, and that is inside you, in your judgments, in your values, in the way you choose to engage with what is given to you. Your morning practice then begins here. When you wake up tomorrow, before you check your phone, before you scroll through the news, before you let the anxiety of the day begin to gather, take a moment, breathe, and ask yourself one simple, powerful question. What in my life today am I spending energy on that is actually outside my control? Write it down if you can. Make a list. Be honest. And then, next to each item on that list, ask a second question. What is within my power in relation to this situation? Maybe you are worried about a job interview. The outcome, whether you get the job, is outside your control, but your preparation is within your control. Your attitude is within your control. Your effort and your presentation and your honesty and your willingness to do your best, these are within your control. Focus there. Pour your energy there. Release the rest. Maybe you are worried about a relationship, whether the other person chooses to stay, whether they love you back, whether they understand you the way you need to be understood. These are outside your control. But how you show up, the love and honesty and care you bring, the courage to communicate clearly, these are within your control. Focus there. Maybe you are worried about your health, about the future, about the state of the world. Release what you cannot change. Focus with precision and commitment on what you can. This is not passive acceptance. This is not giving up or not caring. This is the opposite of passivity. It is the most active, engaged, intentional form of living possible, directing every ounce of your energy toward the things that are genuinely within your power and refusing to waste another precious moment on what is not. The Stoics called this the practice of the will, the disciplined daily exercise of directing your attention and intention toward the things within your sphere of influence. And when you do it consistently, when you make it the foundation of your morning, something remarkable happens. The anxiety begins to lose its grip, not all at once, not overnight, but steadily, gradually, undeniably, because you are no longer feeding it. You are no longer giving it the attention and energy it needs to grow. Every morning when you wake up, draw that line. Inside your control, outside your control. Then live accordingly. This is step 1, and everything that follows builds on it. Step 2, premeditatio malorum, the ancient practice that turns fear into strength. There is a practice the Stoics called premeditatio malorum. In Latin, it means the premeditation of evils. The modern psychological term for it is negative visualization. And when most people first hear about it, their reaction is something like, "Isn't that just making yourself feel worse? If I am already anxious, why would I deliberately imagine bad things happening?" That reaction makes sense. It is intuitive. It follows a logic that most of us absorbed growing up, the logic that says positive thinking is good, negative thinking is bad, and the way to feel better is to focus on the bright side and avoid dwelling on dark possibilities. But the Stoics understood something that flies directly in the face of this conventional wisdom. They understood that most of the anxiety we suffer is not caused by confronting the things we fear. It is caused by avoiding them, by letting them lurk in the shadowy corners of our awareness, half-seen and therefore doubly terrifying. By running from worst-case scenarios instead of turning around and looking at them directly in the light. Think about this from your own experience. When you are lying awake at 3 in the morning, what makes the anxiety worse? Is it when you look directly at what you are afraid of, when you actually think it through clearly and carefully? Or is it the vague, formless, nameless dread that swirls around the edges of your mind? Most people find that it is the latter. The nameless dread is far more paralyzing than the specific, examined fear. Because when you actually look at something, when you think it through in detail, it becomes real, solid, something you can work with. The Stoics discovered this principle thousands of years ago, and they built a daily practice around it. Seneca, one of the greatest Stoic thinkers, wrote, "Let us prepare our minds as if we had come to the very end of life. Let us postpone nothing. Let us balance life's books each day." He practiced deliberate reflection on possible adversities, not to despair over them, but to be prepared for them, to see them clearly and discover what resources he had to meet them. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor who ruled Rome at the height of its power and faced threats that would crush most people, wrote every morning in his private journal about the difficult people and challenging circumstances he might encounter that day. He did not do this to torture himself. He did it so that when those difficulties arrived, he was not caught off guard. He had already faced them in his mind. He had already found his footing. And Epictetus, our slave philosopher, taught his students to regularly reflect on the transient nature of everything they valued: their health, their relationships, their possessions, their freedom not to fall into despair, but to live with a deeper appreciation for what they had while they had it, and a deeper preparation for the inevitable changes that life brings. Here is how the practice works, and here is why it is so effective at dissolving anxiety. When you deliberately and carefully imagine a worst-case scenario, when you actually sit down and think through what would happen if the thing you fear most came to pass, several things happen in your mind and body. First, the fear loses its vagueness. It becomes specific, and specific things can be addressed. You can look at a specific fear and ask, what would I do? How would I respond? What resources do I have? Who could I turn to? What has gotten me through hard times before? Suddenly, the amorphous monster in the dark becomes a problem with actual contours, and your mind, which is designed to solve problems, begins to engage with it productively rather than simply spinning in circles of dread. Second, you often discover that what you fear is not as catastrophic as your anxiety has been telling you it is. When you actually examine the worst-case scenario, when you walk through it step by step, you frequently find that it is something you could survive, something you could navigate. Not pleasant, certainly, not what you would choose, but survivable, manageable. Human beings are far more resilient than anxiety allows us to believe. Third, and this is the most profound effect, when you have clearly imagined the worst, you are suddenly and powerfully free to appreciate the present. If you have genuinely sat with the idea that you might lose something you love, and you have made peace with that possibility, then having that thing right now becomes not something you take for granted, but a source of real, vivid, conscious gratitude. This is what the Stoics meant when they talked about the importance of living fully in the present. The premeditation of loss is what makes genuine appreciation possible. Let me give you a morning practice for this step. In the morning, after you have sat quietly for a moment and done your reflection on the dichotomy of control, take 5 minutes for the premeditatio. Identify the thing you are most anxious about right now, the specific worry that has been following you around, that surfaces whenever your mind goes quiet. Now sit with it. Do not run from it. Turn toward it. Ask yourself, what is the worst realistic outcome of this situation? Not the most dramatic, catastrophic fantasy, but the worst genuinely plausible outcome. Then ask, if that happened, what would I do? How would I respond? What have I survived before that felt just as threatening? Seneca had a phrase for this. He said to ask yourself, what is the worst that can happen, and then to ask, can I bear it? More often than not, the honest answer to the second question is yes, yes, I can bear it. Yes, I would survive. Yes, I have the inner resources to meet it. And once you know that, once you have genuinely faced the fear and discovered that you are not destroyed by looking at it, the grip it has on you loosens. The anxiety does not disappear instantly, but it changes character. It moves from the suffocating, nameless dread of something lurking in the dark to the manageable concern of a thinking person engaging with a real challenge. Seneca wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." Read that again. Let it land. We suffer more often in imagination than in reality. The anxiety we feel about things that have not happened yet is almost always more painful, more paralyzing, more exhausting than the actual event when and if it arrives. Because the human mind, left unchecked, tends to catastrophize, to imagine not just bad outcomes, but the worst possible bad outcomes, with no resources to meet them, no resilience to survive them, no hope of recovery. The premeditatio interrupts that catastrophizing spiral. It says, stop, look at this clearly. What are we actually dealing with? And then it gives your rational mind the opportunity to engage. This practice, done every morning, builds something extraordinary over time. It builds what the Stoics called apatheia, not apathy in the modern sense of not caring, but a kind of stable, grounded equanimity that cannot be easily shaken, because nothing can truly surprise you. You have already met the worst in your imagination. You have already found that you are stronger than it. And that knowledge, that quiet, steady knowledge of your own resilience, is one of the most powerful antidotes to anxiety that exists. Step 3. Live according to reason, how Stoic thinking rewires the anxious mind. Anxiety is, at its core, a problem of thinking, not of feeling. Feeling is a consequence. The problem begins in thought, in the way the mind interprets events. In the stories we tell ourselves about what is happening and what it means and what is likely to happen next, the Stoics knew this with remarkable precision. In fact, their understanding of the relationship between thoughts and emotions anticipates modern cognitive behavioral therapy by nearly 2 millennia. The founder of CBT, Aaron Beck, and his predecessor Albert Ellis, built their entire therapeutic approach on a principle that the Stoics stated explicitly: it is not events that disturb us, but our judgments about events. Epictetus put it this way: men are disturbed not by the things which happen, but by the opinions about the things. Marcus Aurelius echoed this in his private journal. If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment. This is a radical claim, and I want to make sure you feel the full weight of its radicalism, because it is easy to read it quickly and nod along and miss what it is actually saying. It is saying that your anxiety right now, this specific anxiety that you carry, is not caused by the external world. It is caused by the way you are thinking about the external world. It is caused by the interpretation your mind is making, the meaning you are assigning, the story you are telling yourself about what is true and what it implies and what it threatens. Now, that does not mean the difficult things in your life are not real. They are real. Problems are real. Uncertainty is real. Loss is real. The Stoics were not optimists wearing rose-colored glasses. They were realists of the deepest kind. But they recognized that between reality and your emotional response to reality, there is always a mediating layer of thought, of interpretation, and that layer is where anxiety is manufactured. Think about this from your own experience. Two people can face exactly the same situation and have completely different emotional responses. One person loses their job and is devastated with anxiety. Another person loses their job and sees it as an opportunity. The external fact is identical. What is different is the interpretation. What is different is the meaning each person assigns to the event. the story each person tells about what it means for their life and their future and their worth as a human being. The Stoic practice of living according to reason is about learning to examine your interpretations. It is about developing the habit, the disciplined daily habit, of catching your anxiety-producing thoughts and asking, is this actually true? Is this the only way to see this situation? Is my mind giving me an accurate picture of reality, or is it catastrophizing, generalizing, assuming the worst without evidence? The technical term the Stoics used for the initial impression the mind makes about an event was phantasia, a mental image or appearance. They recognized that these first impressions are automatic and often inaccurate. They are not the truth. They are the mind's first draft, which, like all first drafts, needs to be examined and revised. Marcus Aurelius wrote of this practice constantly in his meditations. He would take an anxiety-producing thought and examine it, strip it down, look at it from multiple angles, and often find that it was not as solid or as threatening as it had first appeared. He would ask himself, what is this really? Is this interpretation rational? Is there another way to see it? Let me give you the morning practice for step 3. After your reflection on control and your premeditatio, take a moment to examine the dominant anxious thought you are carrying, the one that has been running in the background of your mind like an unwanted program, and put it through what I call the Stoic examination. Ask yourself, what is the specific thought? State it clearly, not I am anxious. That is a feeling, not a thought. What is the actual belief? Something like, I am going to fail at this presentation and everyone will see that I am not competent. That is a thought. That is the thing to examine. Now ask, what evidence do I have that this is true? Not what do I fear, but what do I actually know? What has my experience been? Have I always failed at presentations? Have people always thought I was incompetent? Look at the evidence honestly. Then ask, what evidence exists that contradicts this thought? When have I done well? When have I handled pressure effectively? When have people responded positively to my work? Your anxious mind tends to cherry-pick the evidence that supports its dark story. The Stoic examination requires you to look at all of it. Then ask, if a wise friend were looking at my situation from the outside, what would they say? What would a calm, rational observer see that my anxiety-clouded mind is missing? And finally, ask, regardless of what happens externally, what is genuinely within my power here? What can I actually do? This practice, done consistently, gradually rewires the way your mind processes anxiety. It is not magic, it takes time. But the Stoics and the cognitive behavioral therapists who rediscovered their insights 2,000 years later are united in their testimony that it works, that the habits of thought can be changed, that the mind that has been trained to catastrophize can be retrained to think clearly and calmly, and that this retraining is the foundation of lasting freedom from anxiety. The philosopher Chrysippus, one of the great systematic Stoic thinkers, described the ideal mental life as being like still water capable of reflecting reality accurately, undistorted by the ripples of unchecked emotion, not cold or dead, alive, engaged, feeling, but not swept away, not controlled by every passing current. Your morning practice is training you toward that kind of stillness. Not the stillness of numbness, but the stillness of depth. Step 4. Amor Fati, loving what is. We have been building toward this step, and it is one of the most beautiful and most challenging ideas in all of Stoic philosophy. It is an idea that was later taken up and amplified by Friedrich Nietzsche, who called it Amor Fati, love of fate. But its roots are thoroughly Stoic, and understanding it in its Stoic context is essential for the morning practice we are building. The Stoic version of this idea centers on a concept they called sympatheia, the Greek word for feeling with or agreement with, referring to the Stoic belief that the universe is a coherent, rational whole, and that everything that happens within it is part of an interconnected web of cause and effect governed by a rational principle they called the Logos. Now, whether you accept the metaphysical framework of the Stoics or not, whether you believe in a rational, ordered universe or not, the practical core of this teaching is available to everyone. And the practical core is this: the things that happen to you are not separate from life. They are not interruptions of life. They are not obstacles placed in your path by a hostile universe trying to prevent you from being happy. They are life. They are what life actually is. And the choice you face every single morning is whether to accept and engage with what is, or to exhaust yourself in resistance to reality. Here is where most of our suffering comes from. Not from the difficult things that happen, but from our resistance to them. From the way we plant our feet and say, "No, this should not be happening." From the energy we pour into wishing things were different, arguing with reality, insisting that the way things are is wrong and unacceptable and unfair. Now, fairness is a real concern. Injustice is real. The Stoics were not teaching passive acceptance of everything. They were not saying that wrong things should not be corrected, or that suffering should just be endured without response. Marcus Aurelius was a reformer. He worked tirelessly to improve conditions within the Roman Empire, to apply justice more fairly, to protect the vulnerable. He was deeply engaged with the world and its problems. But here is the distinction the Stoics drew with great precision. There is a difference between changing what can be changed and suffering over what cannot. There is a difference between taking wise action to improve a situation and being destroyed by the fact that the situation exists. There is a difference between working toward a better future and refusing to fully inhabit the present because the present is not the future you wanted. Amor Fati says, "Love what is, not because everything that happens is good, but because what is reality. And reality is the only material you have to work with, the only place you can actually live, the only moment where action is possible. Fighting reality, arguing with it, resisting it, spending your mental energy wishing it were different, is not just futile. It is the primary source of unnecessary suffering." Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Never let the future disturb you. You will meet it, if you have to, with the same weapons of reason which today arm you against the present." And in another place, "Accept the things to which fate binds you, and love the people with whom fate brings you together, and do so with all your heart." There is an image I want you to hold in your mind. Imagine a river, strong, cold, clear, moving with tremendous power over ancient rocks. Now imagine standing in that river and trying to stop it, bracing yourself against the current, pushing back, using every ounce of your strength to prevent the water from flowing. What happens? The river flows on. You exhaust yourself. You are beaten and battered and eventually swept off your feet. Now imagine something different. Imagine a master kayaker entering that same river, not fighting the current, but reading it, working with it, using its power to navigate, to steer, to go precisely where they want to go. The current is the same. The power of the river has not changed. What has changed is the relationship with it. Amor Fati is about becoming the master kayaker, about learning to work with the river of life rather than fighting it, about accepting what is given with open hands rather than clenched fists, and then finding, within that acceptance, the freedom to act with wisdom, intention, and grace. Your morning practice for step 4 is this. When you wake up, before the day begins, take a moment to do what Marcus Aurelius did every morning in his journal. Acknowledge what is real in your life right now. Not what you wish were true, not what you are hoping for, what is actually, presently, factually real. Hold that reality without judgment for a moment. Not "this should not be happening," but "this is what is happening." Then ask yourself, given what is real, what is possible, Not what would be possible in a perfect world, but what is possible from exactly here, from exactly this situation, with exactly the resources I have. This is where the Stoic wisdom goes from philosophy to power. Because once you stop fighting reality and start engaging with it, once you direct all the energy you were using to resist into actually responding, something extraordinary happens. You find that you have far more power in any situation than you realized. Not the power to change everything, you never had that, but the power to act wisely, to choose well, to bring your full intelligence and compassion and courage to bear on what is actually in front of you. Seneca wrote, "A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a person perfected without trials." The difficulties are not obstacles to your growth. They are the conditions of your growth. The adversity is not evidence that the universe is against you. It is the material from which character is forged. Amor Fati does not mean you have to enjoy difficulty. It means you choose to engage with it rather than be destroyed by it. And that choice, made fresh every morning, renewed with every breath, is one of the most powerful acts of freedom a human being can perform. Step 5. The view from above, gaining perspective on your anxiety. There is a practice that several Stoic thinkers describe, a practice of deliberately shifting your perspective to gain clarity on your situation. Marcus Aurelius called it the view from above. He would imagine himself rising up, withdrawing from his immediate circumstances, and looking down on the vast sweep of human life, the cities and the wilderness, the people going about their days, the constant flow of birth and death and change that has been happening for thousands of years and will continue long after any individual human being is gone. He did this not to feel insignificant or hopeless, but to gain proportion, to remember that the things causing him anxiety, the political disputes, the military threats, the personal conflicts, the physical ailments were real, but they were also part of something vastly larger than any single moment or circumstance. And within that larger context, many of the things that seemed most urgent and most threatening were revealed to be smaller than they had appeared. We have a modern version of this practice that is perhaps even more powerful because we have access to a perspective the ancient Stoics could only imagine. We can think about what we know of the actual cosmos, the 4 billion years of Earth's history, the hundreds of thousands of years of human existence. The way our planet appears from space, as Carl Sagan described it, a pale blue dot suspended in a sunbeam. When you take that view, when you genuinely inhabit it for a moment rather than just thinking about it abstractly, something happens to your anxiety. It does not disappear, but it finds its proper size. The thing that has been filling your entire sky, that has been blocking out everything else, reveals itself to be something much smaller against the background of the whole. This is not minimizing your problems. Your problems are real. Your pain is real. The challenges you face deserve to be taken seriously and addressed thoughtfully. The view from above does not dismiss any of that. What it does is remove the distortion that anxiety creates, the way anxiety makes things appear to fill the entire field of vision, leaving no room for perspective, for proportion, for the recognition that you have survived things before, and that the story of your life is larger than any single chapter. Let me give you the morning practice for this step. Sit quietly for a moment. Close your eyes if that helps, and allow yourself to gradually pull back from your immediate circumstances. First, see yourself in the room where you are sitting. Then pull back further to see yourself in your home, in your neighborhood, in your city. Then further still, your country, your continent, the planet, then the solar system, then the galaxy, then the incomprehensible vastness of the universe. And then let yourself return. Come back to your neighborhood, your city, your home, your room, yourself. But when you return, you bring something with you. You bring proportion. You bring the quiet knowledge that you are a brief, brilliant, irreplaceable flicker of consciousness in an unfathomably ancient cosmos, and that the challenges of this moment, real as they are also just that, moments. They will pass. They always pass. Everything passes. And what remains, what is lasting, is not the external circumstances but the quality of attention and intention and character you bring to them. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "How many a Chrysippus, how many a Socrates, how many an Epictetus have time already swallowed up? All the great and the forgotten, the powerful and the powerless, the anxious and the serene, all swallowed by time. What remains? The choices they made, the character they built, the lives they touched, the wisdom they expressed. And you, in this brief, precious, unrepeatable morning, are making choices too. The choice to engage with these ideas, the choice to practice, the choice to take your own inner life seriously enough to invest in it, the choice, moment by moment, to be the kind of person whose response to difficulty is wisdom rather than panic. That is enough. That is more than enough. That is, in fact, everything." Step 6. Voluntary discomfort, the Stoic practice that destroys fear at its root. This is perhaps the most counterintuitive of all 7 steps. And it is the one that, when people first encounter it, most frequently generates the response, "That sounds like it might be good for someone else, not for me." But stay with me, because once you understand why the Stoics practice this, once you see the mechanism by which it works, you will recognize it as one of the most psychologically sophisticated tools in the entire Stoic arsenal. The practice is this: voluntary discomfort, deliberately choosing on a regular basis to impose mild hardship on yourself, to forego a comfort you normally rely on, to expose yourself to an experience you would normally avoid, not because the discomfort is good in itself, but because of what it teaches you about yourself and your relationship with fear. Seneca, who was extraordinarily wealthy and lived in considerable luxury, nevertheless practiced this regularly. He would periodically eat the simplest food, wear rough clothing, sleep on a hard surface. Not for health reasons, not as penance, but for a specific psychological purpose. He described it this way: "Let me set aside certain days during which I shall practice poverty with the utmost rigor, so that I may know what poverty really is, and by knowing it, take away from it its terror." Do you see what he was doing? He was confronting the thing he feared loss, poverty, discomfort, by voluntarily experiencing a mild version of it, and in experiencing it, discovering that it was not as terrible as his imagination had suggested, that he could bear it, that it did not destroy him, that he was, in fact, still himself, still clear-headed, still capable, still worthy of respect even in reduced circumstances. This is the core of what voluntary discomfort teaches. It teaches you that you are more resilient than your anxiety says you are, that you can handle more than you think you can, that the things you have been most afraid of losing or experiencing are, when actually encountered, survivable and often transformative. And there is another layer to this practice that goes even deeper. When you voluntarily choose discomfort, when you deliberately forego a pleasure or face a fear by your own free decision, you reverse the dynamic of anxiety. Anxiety says, "I am subject to things outside my control. Things might happen to me and I might not be able to bear them." Voluntary discomfort says, "I am in command of this. I am choosing this. I can choose to face hard things, which means hard things do not have power over me that I do not grant them." That psychological shift from victim to agent, from passive to active, from fearful to commanding is extraordinarily powerful, and it carries over when you have practiced voluntarily bearing discomfort in small ways, deliberately and with awareness. You discover that you face the involuntary discomforts of life with a different quality of response. Less panic, less catastrophizing, more steadiness, more the sense that you can meet whatever comes. Modern research on what psychologists call distress tolerance, the capacity to manage emotional pain without it overwhelming you, points to exactly this. People with high distress tolerance are not people who never feel pain or discomfort. They are people who have learned, through experience, that they can handle it. That the feeling of discomfort is not itself a catastrophe. that they do not need to immediately escape or fix or numb every uncomfortable feeling. The Stoics built that capacity deliberately through practice. Your morning practice for step 6 does not have to be dramatic. The whole point of voluntary discomfort is to start small and build your tolerance gradually. Here are some options, from gentler to more challenging. Start by taking a cold shower in the morning. This is actually one of the most effective and widely recommended modern versions of this Stoic practice. The cold water is uncomfortable. Your body will resist. Your mind will say, "Turn up the heat." Don't. Stay with the cold. Breathe. Discover that you can bear it, that the discomfort is real but not dangerous, that you are still you on the other side of it. Or skip breakfast one morning a week, not because intermittent fasting is beneficial, though it might be, but because practicing the experience of being mildly hungry without panicking, without immediately rushing to eliminate the discomfort, builds your capacity to tolerate physical discomfort without catastrophizing. Or sit in silence for 20 minutes without picking up your phone, without seeking stimulation, without filling the discomfort of quiet with noise. Just sit with it. Breathe through the restlessness. Discover that silence is not as threatening as your overstimulated nervous system insists. Or do something that makes you mildly anxious in a social situation. Say something honest that you might normally keep to yourself. Start a conversation with a stranger. Disagree respectfully with someone whose agreement you crave. The specific form of the practice matters less than the consistency and the intention. The intention is always the same. I am choosing to experience this. I am choosing to discover my own capacity. I am choosing to meet discomfort as a teacher rather than an enemy. Epictetus said, "Seek not that the things which happen should happen as you wish, but wish the things which happen to be as they are, and you will have a tranquil flow of life." Voluntary discomfort is one of the most direct paths to the state of mind he describes. Because when you have practiced choosing difficulty, you have trained your system not to react with panic when difficulty arrives uninvited. You have taught yourself that you are larger than the discomfort, more durable than the fear. And that knowledge, built not through affirmations or positive thinking, but through actual, embodied experience, is a kind of confidence that nothing outside you can take away. Step 7. The evening review and morning intention, bookending your day with wisdom. We come now to the 7th and final step, and in some ways, this is the step that makes all the others possible. Because what we are talking about here is the practice that gives all the other practices their structure, their context, their continuity. This is the practice that transforms Stoicism from a collection of interesting ideas into a living, daily, embodied way of being in the world. The Stoics were extraordinarily disciplined about daily reflection. They did not treat philosophy as something you studied in school and then stored in memory while going about the business of ordinary life. For the Stoics, philosophy was the business of ordinary life. It was the primary activity. Every event of every day was an opportunity to practice, to reflect, to refine, to grow. Seneca wrote to his friend Lucilius, "Retire into yourself as much as you can. Associate with those who will make a better person of you. Welcome those whom you yourself can improve." The process is a mutual one. People learn while they teach. He was describing a life of constant, attentive, intentional engagement with the practice of wisdom. But the specific practice I want to give you in this final step is one that several Stoic teachers describe and that Marcus Aurelius clearly practiced throughout his life. It is the practice of the evening review and the morning intention. The evening review is simple. At the end of each day, before you sleep, you sit quietly for a few minutes. 5 to 10 is plenty, and you review the day with honesty and without harsh judgment. You ask yourself 3 questions. The first question, where did I fall short of my values today? Where did I let anxiety drive my behavior rather than reason? Where did I give my power away to fear, to anger, to the opinions of others, to things outside my control? Do not torture yourself with this question. The Stoics were not advocates of self-flagellation, but they were committed to honest self-assessment because they understood that you cannot improve what you refuse to examine. Seneca described this practice beautifully. I examine the entire day and measure my words and deeds. I hide nothing from myself, skip nothing. For why should I be afraid of any of my mistakes, since I can say, beware of doing this again, and I will pardon you this time. There is a quality of firm compassion in that passage, a willingness to see clearly without being destroyed by what you see, to be honest without being cruel. The second question, where did I do well today? Where did I act in accordance with my values, my reason, my best self? Where did I face something difficult and meet it with more grace than I might have expected? Acknowledging the places where you are growing not with vanity, but with honest recognition is important. The Stoics were not masochists. They valued progress, and they noticed it. The third question, what can I practice tomorrow? What specific, concrete intention can I set for the following day? Not a vague resolution to be better, but a specific commitment. Tomorrow, when I feel anxious about a particular situation, I will pause and apply the dichotomy of control. Tomorrow, when I am tempted to catastrophize, I will practice the view from above. Tomorrow, I will begin the day with 5 minutes of the premeditatio. Specific, concrete, actionable. This evening review creates a powerful feedback loop. You are assessing, you are noticing patterns, you are making conscious adjustments. Over time, over weeks and months of consistent practice, this feedback loop produces genuine and lasting transformation, not the surface-level change of a new habit or a motivational boost, but the deep structural change that comes from genuinely, repeatedly, honestly engaging with the quality of your own mind and character. And then there is the morning intention, which is what I want to bring everything together with now. Every morning, before the day begins, before the world rushes in with its demands and its noise and its anxiety-producing stimuli, every single morning, you return to the practice. You take your few minutes of quiet. You run through your Stoic tools. You begin with the dichotomy of control. What today is within my power, what is not. I release what is not. I engage fully with what is. Then the premeditatio. What difficulties might I face today? I look at them clearly. I discover they are survivable. I prepare without being paralyzed. Then the examination of thought. What anxious thought is already running this morning? I examine it. I test it against reason. I adjust my interpretation where my first impression was distorted. Then the Amor Fati. I accept what is. I choose to engage with the day as it actually is, not as I wish it were. I meet reality with open hands. Then, the view from above. I breathe. I remember the larger context. I find my proportion. Then my voluntary discomfort. I do the thing that is mildly hard. I take the cold shower. I sit in silence. I remind myself that I am more capable than my anxiety suggests. And then I set my intention for the day. Not a long, elaborate plan, just a simple, clear, Stoic intention. Something like, today, I will meet every difficulty with reason and with care. Today, I will focus my energy exclusively on what is within my power. Today, I will not waste my inner life on things I cannot control. That's it. The whole practice, done consistently, takes 15 to 20 minutes. And those 15 to 20 minutes, invested in the quality of your inner life before the day demands your attention, can change everything. Marcus Aurelius, with all the demands of ruling an empire pressing on him from every direction, wars and political crises and plagues and personal grief, found time every morning to write in his journal, to engage with these practices, to tend his inner life with the same seriousness and care that he brought to the affairs of state. He understood what most people never discover, that how you begin the day determines how you live the day, that the quality of your morning mind sets the tone for everything that follows. You do not have to run an empire, but you are running your own life, and your life deserves that quality of attention, that degree of care, that commitment to beginning each morning with wisdom rather than just waking up and hoping for the best. The philosophy behind the practice, why Stoicism works when other approaches don't. Before we move to the outro, I want to take a moment to address a question that may be forming in your mind. Perhaps you have tried other approaches to anxiety: positive thinking, meditation, therapy, exercise, medication, and perhaps some of those have helped, at least partially. So, why Stoicism? What does it offer that other approaches don't? The answer lies in what Stoicism addresses at the most fundamental level. Most approaches to anxiety work at the level of symptoms. They help you manage the feeling. They teach you techniques for reducing the intensity of anxious moments. They offer relief. And relief is valuable, I am not dismissing any of that. But relief is not the same as transformation. Relief is what you get when you treat a fever with medication. Transformation is what happens when you address the underlying infection. Stoicism works at the level of the underlying infection. It addresses the basic cognitive and philosophical errors that make anxiety not just possible but almost inevitable for an untreated mind in the modern world. It addresses the confusion between what is and is not in your control. It addresses the habit of catastrophizing. It addresses the tendency to let the imagined future eclipse the actual present. It addresses the desperate need for external validation and the outsourcing of your inner peace to circumstances beyond your reach. It does not just teach you to feel better in the moment. It teaches you to see more accurately, to think more clearly, and to live more wisely. And as you do those things, as your perception clarifies and your thinking sharpens and your living deepens, the anxiety begins to lose the ground it has been standing on. Not because life becomes easier. Life does not become easier, but because you become more capable, more grounded, more clear, more genuinely free. This is why Stoicism has survived for over 2,000 years. This is why emperors and slaves and generals and philosophers have turned to it in their most difficult hours and found genuine relief, not the relief of escape, but the relief of clarity, the relief of understanding, the relief of feeling, finally and truly, that you are equal to what life brings. And this is why, perhaps, you are here today. Because something in you recognized that the anxiety you carry does not have to be the defining feature of your life. Because something in you knows that there is a wiser, clearer, freer way to be. There is, and the path to it is the path the Stoics walked, and it begins, as everything begins, in the morning. The 7 steps, a final summary. Before we close, let me give you the 7 steps one more time, clean and clear, so that you carry them with you. Step 1. The Dichotomy of Control. Every morning, before anything else, draw the line. What is within your power? What is not? Direct your energy only toward the former. Let go of everything in the latter. This single practice, done consistently, is more powerful than almost anything else for dissolving anxiety. Step 2. The Premeditatio Malorum. Each morning, face your fears deliberately. Look at the worst realistic outcome. Walk through it clearly. Discover that you can bear it. Discover that your resilience is greater than your anxiety admits. Let the fear become a specific, examinable thing rather than a formless, paralyzing dread. Step 3. Living according to reason. Examine your anxious thoughts. Separate the interpretation from the event. Ask, is this actually true? Is there another way to see this? What would a wise, calm observer recognize that my anxious mind is missing? Adjust your judgments toward accuracy. Step 4. Amor Fati. Embrace what is. Not passively, not with resignation, but with the active, intentional acceptance of a person who understands that reality is the only material there is to work with. Love the moment you are in, not because it is perfect, but because it is real, and reality is where your power lives. Step 5. The view from above. Gain perspective on your anxiety by deliberately zooming out. See your situation in its larger context, historical, cosmic, human. Let the proportions restore themselves. Remember that this moment is real, but it is also brief, and bring that perspective back with you into the day. Step 6. Voluntary discomfort. Choose regularly to experience mild difficulty voluntarily. Build your capacity to tolerate discomfort. Discover that you are stronger than you thought. Reverse the dynamic of anxiety from passive subject to active agent. Become someone who chooses to face hard things, and therefore someone who is less afraid of hard things. Step 7. The evening review and morning intention. Bookend your days with wisdom. At night, review honestly and without cruelty. In the morning, set your intention with clarity and commitment. Keep the feedback loop running. Keep the practice alive. Keep returning to the work, day after day, with patience and with care. 7 steps, 7 practices, refined over millennia, forged in the actual lives of people who faced far worse than most of us ever will, and who found, through these practices, not just relief, but genuine and lasting freedom. Now they are yours. We have come to the end of this journey together, but I want you to understand something before you go. The end of a video is not the end of the practice. In fact, in some ways, this is where everything truly begins. Because wisdom, as the Stoics understood it, is not a possession. It is not something you acquire by listening to a video or reading a book or accumulating knowledge. Wisdom is a practice. It is something you do, something you return to again and again in the messy, complicated, beautiful, difficult reality of your actual daily life. And that is the invitation I want to leave you with. Not just to understand these ideas, but to live them, to take them into tomorrow's morning and try them on, to sit with the dichotomy of control when you wake up and feel the anxiety already gathering, to practice the premeditatio when the feared thing looms large in your mind, to examine your thoughts with the precision and honesty of a Stoic philosopher, to choose, deliberately and freely, what kind of person you are going to be in the face of what life brings. You are stronger than your anxiety tells you. You are more capable than your worst moments suggest. You are, at your core, a rational, resilient, intelligent human being with access to over 2,000 years of distilled wisdom about how to live well. And you have chosen, today, to engage with that wisdom. That choice matters. Do not underestimate it. The Stoics believe that every human being carries within them a spark of the Logos, the rational, ordering principle of the universe. That there is something in you that is larger than your fears, more durable than your anxieties, more real than the story your worried mind tells about who you are and what you are capable of. That spark is not extinguished by difficulty or loss or uncertainty. It burns on. It is burning right now. And the practices you have learned today are not techniques for manufacturing something new. They are ways of uncovering what was always already there. Your peace of mind is not something that has to be created from nothing. It is something that has to be uncovered layer by careful layer from beneath the accumulated weight of unexamined thoughts, habitual worries, and the long confusion between what is within your power and what is not. The morning is coming. Your morning is coming. And when it does, you will be ready. If this video gave you something, if any part of what you heard today resonated, challenged, moved, or helped you, please take a moment to like this video. It seems like a small thing, but it is how you tell us that this work matters. It is how you help other people find this content who might desperately need it. Every like is a small act of generosity, and we are genuinely grateful for each one. And if you have not already subscribed to Stoic Wisdom, now is the time. We are here every week with new content, new ideas, new practices drawn from the deep well of ancient wisdom and made relevant for the world we actually live in. Subscribe and ring that notification bell so that nothing we share goes past you. Share this video. Think of someone in your life right now, a friend, a family member, a colleague who is struggling with anxiety, who wakes up afraid, who carries a weight that they do not know how to set down. Send them this video, not because you want to fix them or lecture them, but because you love them and you want them to know that there is a different way, that the ancient minds who wrestled with these same questions have left a map, that the path through anxiety exists and has been walked before. And if you want to show your deepest support for what we do here, for the hours of research and writing and care that go into every single video, please consider supporting us with super thanks. That support is what allows us to keep going deep, to keep refusing easy answers and instead offering you the full, serious, nourishing engagement with wisdom that you deserve. We see every super thanks, and we are grateful from the bottom of our hearts. The Stoics had a phrase that Marcus Aurelius returned to again and again. It was so simple and so important that he wrote it multiple times in his private journal, as though he needed to keep reminding himself of it. The phrase was, "This is the day, this moment, this breath. This is where life is. This is where your power is. This is where everything that matters takes place. Not yesterday, with its regrets. Not tomorrow, with its uncertainties. Now, here, in this morning that is beginning for you, this day that is unfolding, this life that is yours to live. Go live it wisely. Go live it well. Go live it free." This is Stoic wisdom, and we will see you in the next one.